Hey, I'm Hunt, and this is Hunt on LSU, your channel for LSU Fighting Tiger football talk. Enjoy the video. We want you to leave a comment below, hit that like button, and subscribe right below the video. Enjoy. But let's start today with Jayden Daniels. We have talked about Jayden Daniels a lot for good reason. He's been sensational. The question is, can he win the Heisman Trophy? And I don't think it's unreasonable in any way, shape, or form to suggest that he is behind the eight ball when it comes to winning the Heisman Trophy. Michael Penix, in his performance for an unbeaten team on Saturday in the game of the week, leapt into the lead. The Athletic does a straw poll every week moving forward. Every single person on the straw poll voted for Michael Penix to be the Heisman Trophy winner, first place. Every single vote went to Michael Penix. You look at the odds at this point, Michael Penix is minus 140, so you have to bet $140 to get $100 back on Penix to be the Heisman Trophy winner. Dylan Gabriel's second at plus 900. J.J. McCarthy and Jayden Daniels are right there in the third slot at plus 1,200. So right now, Jayden Daniels is not the front runner for the Heisman Trophy, but he can still win it. Let's lay out the situation as it sits here, and trust me, I did not think in December of 2019 we'd be having this discussion 4 years later. LSU went through a pretty dark period with quarterbacks, and then we saw Burrow and went, man, we may never see that again. And we may never see that again. That was awesome. But this is really, really good too. So Jayden Daniels at this point, as I lay out some numbers for you, and I know numbers aren't the greatest on radio, but you'll understand, he's completing 73% of his throws. That's fantastic. He's throwing for 328 yards per game. That is awesome. He's thrown 22 touchdowns and 3 interceptions. I think when a lot of people who may not watch Jayden Daniels play every week might be surprised to go, oh, he's throwing for 330 a game? 22 touchdowns, 3 picks. I thought he was just a good thrower and a great runner. Well, he's a great thrower and a great runner. He's run it 86 times this year for 515 yards and 4 touchdowns. He's been the Southeastern Conference Offensive Player of the Week 3 different times this year. He's the first LSU quarterback to account for 4+ touchdowns in 5 straight games. That was snapped over the weekend on Saturday night against Auburn, where he only accounted for 3 touchdowns, but that's just fine. 3 touchdowns, and what he did in that game, which was go over 400 yards, is plenty okay. So how does he stack up with all the quarterbacks, statistically speaking, at this point in the running? Well, he's 3rd in the country in passing yards per game. 3rd in the country in passing yards per game. Michael Penix is 1st. He leads Jayden Daniels, incidentally, by 55 yards per game in that stat. Jayden Daniels is number 2 in the country in passing touchdowns. He's actually thrown more touchdowns than Michael Penix, has him beat by 2. Jayden Daniels leads college football in QBR. He is number 1. Penix comes in 3rd there. He is number 1 in the nation in yards per attempt passing. Michael Penix is 2nd. He is number 1 in the nation in total offense. He leads Michael Penix by 17 yards per game in that stat. And I dug this one up and feel pretty comfortable with it. It comes from CFBstats.com. Jayden Daniels, number 2 in the country in rushing yards per game by a quarterback. Only Air Force's quarterback has more. For reference, Michael Penix to this point on the season has 9 carries for 4 yards. Now, I don't think anybody at Washington's complaining about the fact that Michael Penix has 9 carries for 4 yards, because he's throwing it all over the yard, and they're putting up tons of points, and they're really fun to watch. And I don't even mean that as a knock on Michael Penix at all. You don't have to run as a quarterback. It helps, but you don't have to if you're throwing it for $1 billion a game, which is what he's doing. This is more just a commentary on what Jayden Daniels is. He is the nation's leader in QBR, the nation's leader in yards per attempt, the nation's leader in total offense. He's number 3 in passing yards, number 2 in passing touchdowns. He's been absolutely sensational to this point. And statistically speaking, he's been fairly historic. This is a great story by Chris Hummer of 24/7 Sports, who puts some more color into just what Jayden Daniels has done through 7 games. His pass efficiency rating of 197.7 would be 7th all time. Not 7th right now, and 7th all time. In front of him, Mac Jones in the COVID year, Burrow, of course, Tua, Kyler Murray, Baker Mayfield. That's three Heisman Trophy winners, and then Tua and Mac Jones, who were first-round draft choices. Daniels joined Lamar Jackson and Jalen Hurts as the only FBS players since 2000, so you're going 23 seasons, with 2,000 passing yards and 500 rushing yards through 7 games. Only Lamar Jackson and Jalen Hurts did that. Of course, Lamar Jackson won the Heisman Trophy. Daniels only the 7th FBS quarterback since 2000 to throw for 2,250 and 20 touchdowns while completing 73% of his passes through 7 games. So that's a lot of numbers, but the only players to ever be this accurate and this productive and throw for that many scores since 2000, Burrow, of course, Matt Corral at Ole Miss, Graham Harrell in the air raid, Geno Smith in the air raid, and RG3 who won the Heisman. That's not just stacking folks this year. That's 20-plus years of history. This is really, really good stuff that we're seeing. And I understand why Penix has the mantle. It's not like he's just in some system that's beating up on poor teams. No, they're a top 5 team in the country. They just had the win of probably the college football season. At this point, it would be hard to argue otherwise. You can give that to Texas in Tuscaloosa. You can try with Ohio State going on the road to Notre Dame, although they haven't looked as good. That's probably the win of the season in college football, even though it was at home. And they're undefeated. And like it or not, the Heisman Trophy very, very much values the record of the team and the player that wins it. When I think about guys who have won the Heisman whose teams didn't stack up like that, like it's really in recent past kind of RG3 and the rest, and that was at Baylor, not exactly LSU. You don't get as much credit for quote-unquote dragging LSU along as you would dragging Baylor along. So right now, Jayden Daniels is up against it. But does he have an opportunity to pass Michael Penix? Well, one thing we know is that injuries do happen. And I don't want to put that out there or anything, but it's like for the sense of the discussion, like we got a long way to play, basically. A lot of things can happen. I will tell you this. Michael Penix has thus far played Boise State, Tulsa, a 2-4 Michigan State team, Cal, Arizona, and then Oregon. So really the only team they have played is Oregon, but he went nuts against Oregon. So hat tip there, great job. What's left for Michael Penix? Arizona State, not going to get much there. At Stanford, I realize they just had a ridiculous comeback on Colorado, but they're awful. Lost to Sacramento State, might I remind you. At USC, okay, there'll be some eyeballs there. There'll be a few scouts there, too. Those are probably 2 top 5 picks in the NFL draft playing quarterback against each other in the Coliseum that day. Utah, that's a big one. We know that Utah is big and physical and has a great reputation nationally and did beat Florida to start the season. At Oregon State, who, by the way, is number 12 in the country if you weren't paying attention. And then against Washington State. So you consider the fact that USC, Utah, and Oregon State still to come for Michael Penix. That's real competition as far as the Heisman Trophy goes. I know there are plenty of you listening that go, those aren't SEC teams, whatever. I'm just telling you, the Heisman voters won't feel that way. If he lights it up against a bad USC defense but outduels Caleb Williams and then beats Utah and then goes and wins in Corvallis, like they will look at that very favorably. And at that point, Jayden Daniels will have very little chance, I think. If Washington's going to run this thing undefeated and he plays well in those 3 games, Jayden Daniels is going to have his hands full. But we understand what comes in 2 weeks, 3 weeks. LSU goes to Tuscaloosa. And plenty of folks have walked off that field and felt like the Heisman was in their grasp. Cam Newton, Johnny Manziel, Joe Burrow. Like, you get the picture. So that's where it comes down for Jayden Daniels. The third guy in this mix right now that I mentioned earlier was Dillon Gabriel, who's second in the odds. And you know that Oklahoma's undefeated, and you know that he played exceptionally well against Texas. But Oklahoma hasn't played anybody outside of Texas and doesn't play anybody the rest of the way. They do not play a ranked team the rest of the way. There aren't really any moments, unless Oklahoma creates one by not playing well enough, for Dillon Gabriel to capture the eyes and the hearts of the country. the Big 12 is just not good. And they played the Red River rivalry, and Gabriel was great, and that's pretty much it. So at Big 12 championship game, sure, we'll talk about it. But unquestionably, Penix and Daniels have bigger stages ahead. And unquestionably, to this point, they're statistically better. So Jayden Daniels is going to have to do exactly what he's been doing, and LSU's going to have to win out unless something happens to Michael Penix. And at that point, the discussion changes, and we certainly do not want any part of that. But basically, Jayden Daniels is going to have to do what he does, and Michael Penix is going to have to play some poor games. It's not Jayden Daniels' fault that LSU lost a game that was played in the 50s to Ole Miss. And he wasn't great in the second half against Florida State. You can point immediately to that. But he absolutely has a chance as we sit here towards late October. By the time you play Army and get to a bye before anything real happens, you're in late October. And Jayden Daniels is squarely in the mix of this thing and statistically may merit the thing. But we understand that Michael Penix has been great and hasn't lost. So it's a discussion we're going to be able to monitor. And that is not something I expected, certainly after you walked off the field against Florida State, and probably not when Jayden Daniels transferred over from Arizona State. Like, that's not a guy that I was like, oh, this is a program changer here. I didn't feel like I felt when Tommy White came over. Like, whoa, okay. Just thought it was another quarterback that was going to compete for the starting job. All of a sudden, you look up right now, very, very much in the mix for the Heisman Trophy. Let's hope he can get that to the house. Hey, thanks for watching Hunt on LSU. Before you get out of here, do us a couple of favors. Hit that like button, leave your comments below, and subscribe to the channel for all your Fighting Tiger football talk. See you next time.